Hi guys, welcome to the BIOE 202 Mammalian cell culture tutorial. So first things first, we always want to start off with washing our hands so that any environmental bacteria or fungi that are on our skin get washed away. Notice that I'm not wearing any bracelets or watches because we can never thoroughly clean those, so we can't trust that they're ever clean. Next, I'm going to open up my biosafety cabinet by turning on the airflow and the light and then opening the sash. I'll then want to make sure it's nice and clean for us to use, so I'm going to spray everything down with 70% isopropyl alcohol or ethanol, and wiping from back to front, make sure to wipe everything down so that no bacteria can survive on the surface that could potentially contaminate our cells. Next thing I'm going to do is make sure that my PBS, my trypsin, and my growth media are nice and warm, so I'm putting those in the 37-degree water bath. Then I'm going to check my cells out of the 37-degree incubator by looking at them under the microscope to make sure they actually need to be passaged. So here's what you might see if they're at a low density, but we'll want to be passaging them if they're at a high density, like on the right. So then I'm going to put those back in this incubator to stay nice and toasty while we get everything ready for them. The next thing I'm going to do is get all of my supplies out. So I'm going to need 2 aspirating pipette tips, making sure to spray everything off before putting them in the hood, 3 5ml serological pipettes, and because I'm using a large volume flask today, I'm going to also need a 25ml pipette. Now that my PBS and trypsin are at body temperature, I'm going to take those out, turn on my vacuum pump, and then spray it, making sure to spray down the hose before putting it into the hood. Also note that my vacuum flask, is not pink and it's not overflowing. Next, I'm going to dry off my PBS and my trypsin because I want to make sure they're nice and dry so that when spraying them with 70% ethanol, it's actually 70%, not diluted with the water on the surface of the bottles. Now we should be ready to get our cells out, so we can take them out of the incubator. So the first thing we're going to want to do then is get rid of all that old spent media. So I'm putting an aspirating pipette tip onto my hose and sucking all that old media out. Notice I'm working from the top corner of the flask or the roof corner of the flask because I don't want to scrape my pipette tip along the bottom of the flask where the cells are to prematurely detach them from the bottom of the flask. The next thing I'll want to do is rinse that off with some PBS to get rid of all the old media proteins or any dead cells that are still hanging around. So I'm attaching a serological pipette onto my pipette aid, and for this it doesn't really matter the volume of PBS you use, it doesn't have to be specific, just enough to cover the bottom of the flask and get a good wash. Again, I'm shooting that onto the roof of the cell so I don't jettison the cells off the bottom before I want them to actually detach. So now that that wash has done its job, I'm going to get rid of that and remove all those dead cells and proteins, extra proteins that go along with it. Now I'm ready to actually add my tread. For a flask, a T175 such as this, I will be using probably about 3 mils, but for the T25s that you guys will typically use, 1 mil of trypsin is sufficient. You just want enough to cover the base of your flask. Now I can actually shoot that directly onto the bottom of the flask because I want my cells to start detaching at this point. So switching that around to make sure we get full coverage, we'll put that in the incubator for about 5 minutes. During that time, I can begin getting everything ready. So I'm going to spray off my thing of flasks, new flasks, and then aseptically get them out of the bag. So you don't want to reach into the bag to grab them, but kind of push them out. Then we'll want to label our flasks. All the flasks need to be labeled with the cell type, section number, group number, passage date, patch number, and today's date. Then I'll be getting my growth media out now that it's nice and warm. And now that it's been at least 5 minutes to make sure my things are detaching, I'm going to grab them out of the incubator. To ensure that they're all detached from the bottom of the flask, I can even beat it against the palm of my hand to make sure they're off. Checking that they're detached, and then since they are, we can proceed ahead. So with this, I'm going to be getting some cell growth media out, and we want to quench our trypsin reaction with at least the same volume of trypsin that we used, if not more. So we've quenched that reaction, and now since I'm only volumetrically splitting my cells, I'm going to add my media to my flask because you always want to add media first and then cell suspension to ensure a better chance of even mixing and the cells not adhering to the bottom of the plate in patches, for example. Now I have my cell suspension that's been quenched, and I'm going to thoroughly mix that. So up and down with my 5 ml pipette pretty swiftly, and washing that down the surface of the flask to get all of our cells. We want to make sure we have a nice even suspension so that when we take out our 50 microliters for counting on the hemocytometer, that's actually an accurate representation. So after it's been evenly mixed, you'll take 50 microliters out and mix it with trypan blue, and load it onto the hemocytometer, which you can see here. This is also what you might see, this is what your cells might look like, with the blue one with the arrow at it is what a dead cell will look like. So now that I've counted my cells and I know how much cell suspension to add to each flask, I'm going to do that since they already have media in them. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm going to again mix in there so that I know that I have a very even suspension of cells and I'll get an even monolayer. Notice that I'm going back and forth and side to side, not swirling in a circle, because that will give us that distinctive bullseye pattern of throwing the cells out in a circle when you swirl them around like that. So we're almost done, but we want to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes, so we're just going to briefly check to make sure that there are actually cells in our suspensions, which there are, so I can put them back in the cell incubator until we are ready to use them again. Now that all of those are in the incubator, I can begin to clean up my hood. So I want to put everything away, throw all of my trash into the biohazard trash, and then bleach my cells. So I want to put some 10% bleach on there to make sure that they are nice and dead, and then we want to wait at least 10 minutes before we dispose of that. So in the meantime, I'm going to put everything away, plug that in, spray my hose off again because it could have gotten cells on it, and make sure to spray the inside of that thoroughly down with some 10% bleach, so that no cell suspension is going to drip out of that hose. Also, notice that my flask is not full or pink, so it's good to go. Then again, at the end, we want to spray everything down so that no bacteria hopefully are getting a chance to hang out in there and survive. Now it's been at least 10 minutes, so I can go and rinse my bleached cells out. So I'm going to rinse those out with some tap water, and then they can get discarded in the regular trash. Now I'm ready to take my gloves off, throw them away in the biohazard trash, take my coat off, and then at the very end, I'm always going to want to wash my hands just to make sure that I'm not contaminating myself. Thanks for watching, guys!